Hello everyone, my name is Kyle and I am a third year DPT student just wanting to share my thoughts about the NPTE. I have already made two other videos, one of which I have spoken about exactly how I planned to study for the NPTE, and then another video where I spoke about how I actually studied, and I just wanted to put it together and really tell you guys a bit about how I would suggest you study based on what I learned and at least adjusting my own schedule that I had made in that original video. For this video, I'm going to split it up into three different sections. The first section, I'm really going to be talking about what things I think hindered my studying based on my initial plan. Then I'm going to show you guys exactly what I would suggest as a plan that would be more ideal based on the time frame that I had, which was about a 90-day plan. And then finally, I want to just share some things that I think that you could do to supplement my plan if you do have more time than what I had, because I was doing my studying for that 90-day plan while I was on my final clinical. So if you have more time, I'll make sure to add in some things that you can make sure to supplement the plan that I'm supplying if you have more time. So getting into the things that I think I could have improved from my initial plan that I had made in that first video was really first and foremost because I believe it was the most impactful to kind of how I distributed my studying was I put so much time into initial content review during my original plan that I feel like I wasn't really touching on subjects that I should have known before going into any of my tests to really know my knowledge, because then I felt like every single practice test I was taking after that, I was like, oh, I'm really weak on this aspect. I studied that one. So then I really studied that one, and then I would get better on that one. But then because I didn't hit another one of these sections, then I would have that next section be one that I was really struggling on. And then I would study that one, and I just felt like it wasn't really conducive to what I was really hoping for when it got to the application phase of my studying, when I started taking more and more of those practice exams. So I didn't feel like I had distributed it well. So that's one of the biggest things I think for me from my original plan. But also I feel like one of the things I should have done is started making some of my study material earlier and reviewing my tests a lot sooner and making material from that, whether it was flashcards, whether it was other forms of active recall, just to make sure that that was done and out of the way, and I wasn't spending time during the more application portion of my studying on just creation of materials, which in itself is studying. So I think that that is something that I wish I had moved up and done more of, so that way later in my studying I would have had more opportunities to utilize those materials and really get to know them on a deeper level. Lastly, I think one of the biggest things that I could have done would have been having more repetition with test questions and just going through the endurance of going through at least a section earlier in my studying, as well as just doing it a bit more throughout it, because I feel like I really only got a lot of test repetition in that final week and a half or so of my initial plan, because I started going back to tests I had already taken, recovering the answers and going through a section at a time, timing myself, seeing how many I was getting right again, and really getting into that testing mode. So I think if I would have spent more time and done it a bit earlier, that I would have reduced the amount of test-related mistakes I had made rather than content-related mistakes, and could have gotten me a better score overall. So now that you kind of understand exactly what I had hoped had changed in my plan, let me show you guys exactly what I would have changed my plan to if I were to take the NPTE again. I'll put the first month of it on screen, which is phase 1 review. Now, looking at the first 30 days of this 90-day plan, it's really focused on going over each of the content areas that the NPTE exam is split into. If you don't know what those content areas are, you can always look at them on the FSBPT website, which I'll make sure to put a link in the description down below for, so that you can see exactly what I mean. But in the short of it, it's basically split between the musculoskeletal system, the neuromuscular and nervous systems, the cardiopulmonary systems, other systems, and non-systems domains. So you can see those each are kind of given their own color within this plan. And we start out first with musculoskeletal system, which I gave about 8 days to review. This I kept very broad and just put it in the systems because what I needed to study or what you needed to study or anyone else needs to study is a lot different. So I just wanted to provide that opportunity for you to figure out exactly what you needed, but I would plan to try and cover the entire musculoskeletal conditions within those first 8 days. Then I would switch over to the neuro systems for about 7 days, then swap over to the cardio and pulmonary systems for about 5 days, then going on to other systems, splitting it on each system for 6 days, and then finally ending with non-systems for about 4 days. Now, if you're watching this video and you're like, Kyle, I can't have all of these big, ominous, just open statements about, yeah, just go and study the systems. What I would suggest that you do, and this was something that my school offered us, is getting one of the complete review books that just covers all of the content that you've done throughout PT school, because then you have everything in one place. It's a great reference and kind of guides you through the process, and then you can just split it across the days that I provided in the plan, and that will give you a bit more direction. And as you can see at the bottom of this phase in the plan, the main priorities here are really to do your initial review of content, make sure you remember everything that you've learned in physical therapy school, and then also to discover exactly where your weaknesses are and where your strengths are, so that way you can determine as you're moving through your studying where more of your effort needs to go into and where less of it does. Next, we're moving on to phase 2, which is to apply and prepare. Now, you can see on screen exactly what I suggest in this phase 2, days 31 through 60, where you can look at each day and see exactly what I would suggest, but just for simplicity, I'm going to go over 1 week, and then you can kind of figure out what each of these mean. So the first thing is the additional content review. Those days provide you an opportunity to, after that first month, whatever areas you still had questions about, you needed extra time to review, those are your days to be able to do it right before you take your first practice exam. Whenever it says practice exam, that's utilizing practice exams to see exactly where you're at. It's kind of that checkpoint to see if your studying is improving, or the first one is to figure out exactly where you're at right now so that you know how much you need to improve to get to the spot that you want to. Of course, I also have rest days in there. You can always use more rest days, but at least for me, I always suggest doing it after your practice exam days because those days are long. You're sitting there really using your brain for a while, so giving yourself a chance to reset and recuperate before you start studying again is always a good option. And then, of course, exam review. That's where you can review the practice exam that you had just taken. Make sure that you're noting all of the areas that you're really struggling on, like interventions, examination, whether it was neuromuscular conditions or cardiopulmonary conditions. Figure out exactly where you're kind of having those struggles and what things you are doing really well with, continuing that kind of strength and weakness assessment. Then, of course, you also have study material creation, where you will utilize everything that you got from that exam review, as well as everything you learned from that first month of studying to start making that study material for your weaknesses. Really focusing in on those, especially level 1 questions early on that are kind of the ones that are just tell me what this is, rather than interpretation, which is some of the level 2 and level 3 questions. Then on those review study material days, that's your opportunity to utilize those flashcards, to utilize those drawings with blanks next to them that you fill in, for example, like the parts of the brain and what each of the parts of the brain do. All of those active recall techniques are the ones that I'm really going to encourage because I felt that they were the most impactful in my learning as a whole. And looking down again at our top priorities for this phase, it's really to learn the test and how it is formatted, to review all of that missed content to make sure that you're taking it head on right away and not waiting till the end to really get those tougher subjects, And then, of course, creating those study materials that you're really going to utilize in that last month to master the content. And that leads us to phase 3, test mastery of our 90-day study plan. So this will be days 61 through 90. In this last phase, there really aren't too many new additional types of days that I have added in, so I'll just talk about the new ones that I've added in, and you can just look at the plan to see the day by day of it. But the new ones that were added in are section retakes, and this is what I was doing in the last week and a half of my actual studying schedule, was where I was going back to my first practice exam that I had taken, and I was covering up the answers in order to be able to essentially retake the test, and I would do it one section at a time. So I would do 45 questions, see exactly how long it took me, see how well I performed, then do another section. So during these section retakes, I was doing a section or two every evening, so it was taking me around 1 to 2 hours depending on how many sections I did during the evening, and really just getting more repetition of exactly how the questions are asked, thinking through my thought process, and really just honing in on those test-taking skills, which, as I mentioned before, was something that I really wanted to improve on. The other thing that I did want to comment about on this was the day before the exam, I put a rest day before exam day on day 90, and that is just because that's what I would encourage you to do. Give yourself that time to reset before going into the big test. But I do know that there are a lot of people out there who are going to be very nervous before test day and really want to finalize everything, and that's why I put in parentheses that you, of course, can do a light review just to make sure that any of the stuff that you know is really tough or you want to make sure that you have down, you're good to go. But make sure on that day before the exam, you do at least give yourself a little bit of a break and not go really hard on studying, because you want to have some capacity for your brain going into exam day. And as I kind of already mentioned, the main priorities for this final phase of studying is going to be minimizing those test-related mistakes rather than content-related mistakes, since hopefully by now you have figured out all of the content, you're feeling more comfortable with it and just getting all of the finer bits of the material, and you're just making sure that you're knowing exactly what the questions are asking, exactly what they're looking for in each of the questions. That way you don't have to worry about going in between answers. You can really just hone in on, yes, they're asking me this, so I'm taking this bit of content. Also, you want to be able to start verbalizing your reasoning. When I was doing those section retakes, I would really take my time to go through each and every answer that was possible for a question and say, this is why this isn't the answer, and this is why this is the answer for every single one of the choices. So that way, even if that wasn't the purpose of the question, I was getting review on all of them and utilizing that active recall. Finally, this is your last chance to solidify your understanding of all of the material, so that's why there's a bit of the review study material days sprinkled in throughout all of the section retakes to make sure that you're reviewing all of that tougher material that you had, whether it was earlier on or later in your studying period. Now that we've gone over the entire plan as a whole, I thought I would add in some little bits of suggestions that you could use to fill any extra time that you have. If you, for example, during your review phase of this plan, you can always start using any of the extra time that you have to start creating study material or studying it every night after you finish your reading that you did, which was something that I did later on. As I was reading, I would be doing my flashcards in the evening, or I would do another form of active recall in order to help solidify the content. Basically, I would say review section, if you're ahead on that, start creating study material. If you're at the apply and practice section, you can always start reviewing some of the practice tests that you had already taken, or supplementing it with some of the other free resources that I actually have a video on. I'll make sure to link that in the description down below, of free resources for the NPTE, such as PT365, Final Frontiers app. They all have some daily PT questions that you can do that are formatted exactly like they are on the NPTE to get yourself a little bit more practice in between the times that you're doing your practice exams, just to make sure that you're getting on that earlier. And then, of course, finally in that final section, I know that I put a lot of that emphasis on the retakes of all of the previous practice tests and doing that just because I felt that was really useful for me. But if you feel like yourself you needed more content review directly with content and not as much on the actual test taking itself, then I would suggest that you swap out some of those section review days with some study material review to make sure that you're getting exactly what you need out of your studying. And with that, that is how I would study for the NPTE if I were to take it a second time. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe down below. And if you would like an additional resource for NPTE studying, make sure to check out my link in the description down below for 20% off a Picmonic subscription. Feel free to utilize their 5-day free trial to see if it's right for you. If you would like to see other content related to PT school, anything else in regards to the NPTE, as well as day in the life content, stereotype videos, and much more, check out the rest of my channel as a whole. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been KBDPT, and I'll see you all in the next video.